sweet dreams. I love your mind when it bleeds. Yes, I worry when you take it to sleep.
Hi. So recently a buddy of mine gave me this to check it out because I had been complaining about the Roland VP-03, which is what I had been using on stage when I needed a vocoder, and let's say I wasn't entirely happy with it. And he had switched from this to this a while back and said he really liked the Behringer. So now that I have them both with me, I thought I'd do a little comparison of the two and maybe go through what these do. The controls on the two are pretty much the same, except for the sequencer on the Roland, but I'm not entirely in the clear on what the exact use for this type of sequencer in a vocoder could be. So let's go through all of these controls right now. I'll show you what they do on the Behringer because it's just easier to see. Let's start in the top left, headphone volume, self-explanatory. There's an input level control for an external synth, which is also different to the VP-03. You cannot plug in an external synth into the VP-03. Then there's a little mixer section. There's actually 4 and not just 3 different signals that can come out of the VC340. One of them is the actual vocoder, which you can hear with all the other signals turned down. It's still on. So if I talk into the microphone that's plugged into the synth, you can hear the vocoder. Now with the direct mic control, I can mix in the original signal that's going into the synth, and if I turn off the vocoder, it's just going straight through and you can hear my voice without any processing. Then there's the human voice, which is this section. We'll talk about this later, which is just an emulation, a very basic one of the human voice. And there's the string section, which is over here. It sounds like this. There's vibrato control, which can affect the vocoder or the human voice. These arrows up here always show you which section affects what other section. So there's an arrow going from the vibrato thing to human voice and to vocoder, but not to the strings. So no vibrato on the strings. So let me turn on the human voice thing so we can hear it. Depth tells you how much the pitch vibrates, the rate, how fast, and the delay time is kind of a envelope thing. So I start once I start playing, there's no vibrato yet, but after a while it starts coming in. Well, good. Then there's the vocoder. There's 2 controls here, a tone control and a microphone level control. So if I turn on the direct mic signal, we can hear how it affects the gain of the microphone. If I turn this up, there's a very basic indication of how loud it is. Green meaning you're good, red meaning too loud. And then there's a tone control, which affects how the vocoder sounds. For this, I have to turn it on. So now we can hear the vocoder, and this makes it darker, and this makes it brighter. These 2 buttons, lower and upper, point to the different registers on the keyboard. You can see these are also labeled here, where the keyboard splits between lower and upper. So down here, this is lower. If I turn this off, we can't hear anything anymore. But if I play up here, we can still hear it, and vice versa. This is not only the lower registers active. We can't hear anything up here, but down here it works. And then lastly, there's an ensemble effect for the vocoder. So yeah, this is what this sounds like, a chorus, kind of ensemble chorus effect. Then next there's the human voice section. For this, let me turn this up and maybe turn the vocoder off. Same thing here, lower and upper register. And then there's two different octaves for this male voice in the lower register. This one is the lower one, and this is the higher one. And this is both of them together. For the upper register, we get a male and a female. Sound like this: male, female, and both of them together. Then, same as before, we get an ensemble effect. This attack slider only affects the human voice thing, and it is pretty self-explanatory too. Higher setting means the sound comes in slower. Then next, the release setting, as you can see, affects both the human voice and the strings, which we're going to get to in just a second. If I turn this up, there's the sound fades out gradually, and even though I stop pressing the key, the sound doesn't drop out abruptly. For the string section, we also get these on-off switches for the lower and the upper register, a tone control, turn on the strings. This is the tone control, darker, brighter, and then the attack control. Also here exclusive to the strings and not shared with the human voice, as opposed to the release, which we talked about before, which affects both of these. Down here, let me talk about this switch first. This moves the keyboard up and down one octave. This is also the reason why we have two split points here. If it's in the upper position, the split between the keyboard, the lower section and the higher section is here. And if it's in the lower position, it's up here. I'm guessing this keyboard splitting is so you can play, for example, strings in the lower part and the human voice in the higher one. So if you have this set to lower only and this set to higher only, down here we get the strings. And up here, the human voice. Then there's a tuning button, which is there just to tune your pitch. And then these four controls are all connected together. It's a pitch drift kind of thing. When it's set to auto, the pitch drifts from what this is set to. H stands for high, L for low. So it drifts up from the position this knob is set to. This, I think, is an octave. Or maybe just a tiny little bit. And then the time controls how fast it slides up to the note you're actually playing on the keyboard. Short or long. Then this switch decides if this happens automatically. You can turn it off or control it externally. And if it's controlled manually, this slider decides what pitch you actually hear. So we have the normal pitch. And it goes down to where this is set to again. So I can, if I want to, I can set it to a major second, like a pitch wheel would be, or all the way to. If it's set to high, this guy doesn't do anything. And then lastly, there's a master volume control. So now that I went through all of this, let me talk again about the differences between the two real quick before I'm going to actually show you how they sound different or whether they do sound different or not. For one, on the Roland, we get these two sliders. One is a pitch wheel and one does a similar thing like the pitch shifting fader on the Behringer. I talked about the sequencer. And the rest is pretty much the same. The main differences are on the back, actually. So here we have a on-off switch, a USB connection for power and MIDI, I think. a volume control, which is the same as this one on the Behringer, a phone and a main output, both using the tiny little jacks. And then there's a MIDI in and a MIDI out. If I'm not completely mistaken, I think it does MIDI through as well. You just have to press some button combination to turn that setting on. And then on the Behringer, we get quite a bit more. There's USB. I'm not sure what it all does. There's a separate plug for the MIDI through. You also get the in and out. There's a proper stereo out with 2 1/4-inch jacks. Inputs for external control devices. A input for an external synth. A phone's output. And a microphone input, which features a XLR and a jack input, which is quite handy, I think. So now that we know how this all works, I'm gonna set up this guy as well so we can compare how the two sound. And I'm gonna make some music with them and see how they stack up against each other. So I'm back, and as you can see, it's gotten pretty crowded on my tiny table here. I've got the VP-03 set up now as well. And I got out the deluge to send some MIDI to the two because, you know, well, this guy doesn't have a keyboard. And this way, if I'm just sending MIDI to the two, I don't have to actually play the keyboard, which makes it easier for me as well. I'm sending the same MIDI to both synthesizers on channel 6 to the VP-03 and channel 1 to the Behringer. The audio coming out of the two vocoders are going into a small mixer. And from there, the audio is going back into the deluge. So I can add some effects there. So we're all set now to compare whether or not they sound the same. Which one sounds better or worse? We'll see. So I'm sending the MIDI. Right now, all the sound sources are turned off. I'm turning on the strings on the two machines, and then I'll bring them in using the balance faders. This is the VP-03. And this is the same thing on the Behringer. Again. To me, they sound very similar, even though I think the Behringer has a bit more low end, while the VP-03 sounds a bit more transparent and is more on the treble-y side. Let's hear the human voice. Without the ensemble effect first. This is both octaves, the higher one and the lower one. Same thing on the Behringer. Higher one. Lower one. Vibrato. Again, very similar. And then lastly, let's move on to the vocoder, because this is what we all are here for. I'm turning off the ensemble effect first so we can hear it without it applied, and we'll do it with it afterwards. So let me turn on the bass line here, because otherwise I have no reference of time whatsoever, which is hard for me to sing to. This is the Behringer.
Oh my God, is it on fire? Who you gonna turn to? Who you gonna run from now? Hide your ex while you wanna go. Here's the music going down.
And the Roland.
my God, is it all on fire? Who you gonna turn to? Who you gonna run from now? Hide your rags while you're in the cold. Is it me? Is it going down?
Now again, they sound very similar. I'm noticing that I have to go a lot higher with the level control on the Roland to get to a similar volume that I'm getting on the Behringer with a really low setting, even though I have the volume on the output turned up all the way on the Roland and only halfway here on the Behringer. So the gain staging works somewhat differently on the two, I'm guessing. Let's hear it with the ensemble effect. Behringer first.
Oh my God, is it all on fire? Who you gonna turn to? Who you gonna learn from now? Hide your rags while you're in the cold. Is it me? Is it going down?
Cool. I really like the sound of both of them. I just like vocoders. I think they're great and a lot of fun. Again, the Roland sounds a bit more transparent to me. I actually prefer the sound, especially the vocoder sound on the Roland a bit. I'm thinking now that I'm comparing the two. I had the tone controls all the way up now during this thing because I'm guessing there's just some kind of filtering going on when you turn this down. Maybe we can have a listen to how it sounds with the slider in the middle on the two of them, just for the fun of it. Let's do the Roland first this time.
Oh my God, is it all on fire? Who you gonna turn to? Who you gonna learn from now? Hide your rags while you're in the cold. Is it me? Is it going down?
Now you could hear that it started to distort when I went too high on the mic level setting here. This is a trait that the two of them share. I'm guessing it's something that was in the original as well. You have to be really careful because otherwise you'll be getting really nasty distortion that you don't want if the mic level is too high. So now, because this is always fun, let's add some reverb and maybe do some more of this track I was just singing.
My God, is it on fire? Who you gonna turn to? Who you gonna learn from now? Hide your rags while you're in the cold. Is it me? Is it going down?
Let's see how it sounds with the direct mic signal mixed into the thing.
time to choose. I love you now, what it means. Yes, I worry when you say it gets to sleep on.
So cool. This is just a lot of fun playing with the vocoder. You don't have to worry too much about hitting the right notes. Like I said before, and you might have noticed it here too, you have to be really, really careful not to be too loud with the singing, because the vocoder starts sounding really nasty if the signal comes in too hot. But other than that, I think those are both great units. Sound-wise, I prefer the VP-03 a little bit over the Behringer, but bottom line, especially when it comes to going onto a stage with it, I think this is just a lot better because it's easier to handle. I don't use a keyboard on the vocoder myself, but I have to say this keyboard is really nice. So if you want to actually play and sing at the same time, this comes in really handy. And then the outputs are a lot nicer than on the VP-03, and just the faders are bigger and better. It's built sturdier. So lots of advantages. The only thing I can think of that speaks for the VP-03 over the VC340, other than that it's really nice sound, is that it is small. If you have a small setup and you want to squeeze in a vocoder, this is probably better than this thing because it takes up quite a lot of space. But I have to say, I really like this. Maybe I'll get one too. Depends on how much vocoding I will be doing in the future. So I hope this was interesting or helpful or entertaining or useful if you're in the market for a vocoder. In any case, thanks a lot for watching.